So various parks in the UK have seen rebrands over the past few years. Obviously Thorpe Park, Drayton Manor, and most recently of all, Blackpool Pleasure Beach into Pleasure Beach Resort. But one park you may not have expected to see a rebrand is Southport Pleasureland. Welcome back to another video, and today we've received some somewhat unexpected news from what was formerly known as Southport Pleasureland, of course located in Southport. They are going to be rebranding for the 2025 season into Adventure Coast Southport. This is part of an effort to turn the park from what essentially at the moment is a temporary fun fair with travelling rides into a permanent family theme park. Now, for those of you who are unaware of the history of this place, it was actually originally owned by the Thompson family, who of course owned Blackpool Pleasure Beach up the coast. And it was originally very similar to Pleasure Beach. It was a family-owned amusement park with a lot of permanent attractions that the locals and people further afield really enjoyed. However, due to financial difficulties, the park unfortunately had to close in 2006. A couple of years later, some new owners actually bought the site and started to redevelop the park by bringing in these temporary fun fair rides that would alternate every few years or so. And that's essentially how the place has operated ever since. It was a free-to-enter park, and what you'd essentially do is you'd buy these cards that you could put tokens on, and different rides would cost different amounts of tokens. However, as a measure to limit capacity in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, because obviously there were various restrictions that were put in place that limited the amount of people that could be in a confined premises at any given time, the park actually scrapped free entry and introduced a ticketing system, which has kind of stuck around ever since, to my knowledge. And all these years later, it seems to be that they've decided that they're going to stick to that means of operation and transform the park into something that's seemingly more permanent. This is reflected in the newly revamped website that confirms that Adventure Coast Southport is going to be opening from the 5th of April 2025 and is going to be running with a wristband system. Now, I know some of you may be wondering, are you not disappointed in Adventure Coast Southport that they're getting rid of the paper ride system for good? By the sounds of things, as you're always on about how Blackpool Pleasure Beach should bring back the paper ride system, you've got to consider the fact that while they may seem similar to some extent, Pleasure Beach and Southport Pleasureland are two very different parks. Pleasure Beach is a full-blown amusement park, whereas Southport Pleasureland is essentially a fun fair, and it has the reputation of being just that. And getting rid of a paper ride system, as well as introducing themed areas to the park, which I'll discuss what that'll entail in a little bit more detail in a minute, are going to make the place seem more in line with the UK's major theme parks, meaning it will therefore be more likely to be interpreted as such. And fun fairs are very different places to seaside amusement parks like Blackpool Pleasure Beach. You don't tend to get people from all over the country travelling to a fun fair, whereas Blackpool Pleasure Beach gets visitors from Scotland all the way down to London. As long as they price wristbands at a reasonable price, I would expect that in light of this rebrand, their attendance would increase. And if not, if they do end up in a Pleasure Beach situation where everyone's complaining that free entry isn't a thing anymore, so be it. They could just revert back to a free entry system because they have the infrastructure to be able to do that, and they've operated like that for many years. Now, it's also evident from this rebrand on the website that Adventure Coast Southport are going to be operating with themed areas similar to the theme parks we have here in the UK. So they're very much trying to brand themselves as a theme park here rather than an amusement park. And again, I guess that is to just help with them shifting their reputation from that of a fun fair into a full-blown family theme park. So although it may seem a bit weird that a park near the seaside is doing this, as it's not typical with parks in these sorts of locations. I mean, Blackpool Pleasure Beach isn't split into themed areas. I think it may well benefit the park. Adventure Cove Southport is going to open with 4 themed areas, those being Viking Landing, which is obviously going to be a land theme to Vikings. There's also Steampunk Bay, which has actually been at the park for a few years now and is home to a few thrill rides, most notably. You've then got Cartoon Boardwalk, which I assume is going to be themed to your typical seaside resort style of location. And finally, we've got Pirate Cove, which is obviously going to be a pirate themed area, and that's something that Southport Pleasureland are quite experienced in, as they've had a few pirate-themed rides there over the years. I know some of you may be a bit surprised to see Southport Pleasureland's content on this channel, as although it's essentially my other local park, as well as obviously Blackpool Pleasure Beach, it's not somewhere I visit very often at all. I've not been since August 2019, and with all the changes going on there at the moment, I think 2025 may well be the year I ought to make a return visit. And we've also had a lot of exciting news with potential new permanent roller coasters there lately as well. We had rumours of a potential Zamperla thrill ride coming to the park a few years ago, and as recent as last year I believe there were rumours circulating of them potentially getting a Gerstlauer Eurofighter as well. But be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and to hear my thoughts on what I believe the future of Blackpool Pleasure Beach could entail, then be sure to check out the video on the right side of your screen. And for more things theme park related in the UK and beyond, make sure you click the icon in the centre of your screen to subscribe.